The wind howled through the pines of Thornvale, carrying the faint scent of rain and wood smoke. Beneath the watchful silver moon, the villagers whispered her name as though it were a curse. Lyra Thornvale, born beneath an eclipsed moon, marked by silence where a wolf's cry should have been. To them she was a girl with no spirit, a hollow vessel, a reminder of the gods' displeasure. Lyra ignored their stares as she crossed the muddy road toward the healer's hut. Her basket of herbs was nearly empty, her boots soaked from the riverbank. The evening fog curled around her legs like ghosts. Inside the hut, the old herbalist Era stirred a pot of willow bark and turned with a sigh. "You went to the river again," she said, her voice brittle as frost. "Do you enjoy tempting the spirits of the forest?" "I went to find Feverroot," Lyra replied softly. "The boy in the mill still burns with fever. The spirits can forgive me for that." Era's eyes softened, though her tone remained stern. "Forgive, maybe, but the villagers will not. The moonrise gathering is tomorrow, and they'll be looking for a reason to blame someone when the night turns wild." Lyra set down the basket. "They'll have plenty to celebrate without me. I'm not allowed beyond the hill." Era moved closer, her hands trembling as she brushed a strand of hair from Lyra's face. "Stay hidden tomorrow, my child. The gathering is not for the likes of us." But Lyra had heard the drums since dawn, the rhythmic call of fate. Every wolf in the kingdom, unmated and eager, would dance beneath the moon to seek their destined mate. The thought pulled at her chest like an ache she could not name. When night fell, the village glowed with torches. The square filled with laughter, fur-lined cloaks and the scent of roasted meat. Lyra stood at the edge of the forest, cloaked in shadow, watching. For once she wanted to belong, not as a servant, not as the cursed girl, but as a wolf among wolves. The drums deepened, echoing against the mountains. A hush fell across the crowd. Then came the low growl of horns, a sound known in every corner of the realm. The Alpha King had arrived. He rode through the mist on a black stallion, his cloak trailing like smoke, his silver eyes cutting through the dark. Caelan Draven, ruler of the United Packs, conqueror of the Blood Wars. The villagers dropped to their knees as he dismounted, his gaze sweeping the crowd. Lyra froze. Something in the air changed. The scent of pine sharpened. The night itself seemed to hold its breath. Caelan's head turned, slowly, until his eyes locked onto hers. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, beneath her skin, a strange heat flared at the base of her neck, sharp and searing. Lyra gasped and stepped back, clutching her throat. The mark burned faintly beneath her fingers, glowing where no mark had ever been. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The cursed girl," someone hissed. "She's marked." Caelan took a step forward, his expression unreadable. "Who is she?" No one answered. The villagers knelt lower, fearful. Era pushed through the crowd, throwing her shawl over Lyra's shoulders. "She's no one, my lord. Forgive her trespass." But the Alpha King's gaze did not waver. "No one does not bear the mark of the moon." The drums ceased. Even the wind fell silent. Lyra wanted to speak, to explain that it was a mistake, that she had never been chosen for anything in her life, but her voice failed her. The burning subsided into a dull, pulsing warmth like a heartbeat under her skin. Caelan turned to his guard. "Bring her to the capital." Era's breath caught. "She's just a girl." The king looked at Lyra once more, eyes glinting like tempered steel. "No, she's something else." As the crowd parted to let the guards pass, Lyra's knees trembled. She didn't know whether to run or to follow. Somewhere deep inside, a whisper rose, soft, ancient, and unmistakable. "Finally," it said, "you are seen." Before the darkness swallowed her, Lyra looked once more toward the moon and wondered what curse had just been broken, or begun. The morning after the moonrise gathering dawned grey and cold. Thornvale lay wrapped in a tense silence, as though the forest itself feared to breathe. Smoke drifted from the chimneys, but no one spoke to the girl who had been taken to the edge of the square the night before, and returned before dawn. Lyra walked through the village with her hood pulled low, feeling the weight of every stare, every whispered prayer. Rumors had already spread like wildfire, that the Alpha King had looked upon her and the moon had burned her skin, that she carried a witch's mark, that the cursed girl had bewitched the ruler of wolves. The elders had sent word to the capital before sunrise. Whatever fate awaited her would come soon. At the healer's hut, Era paced before the fire, clutching a wooden charm. "You should have run when I told you," she muttered, her hands trembling. "The moon sees too much, Lyra. You drew its eye, and now the king's gaze follows you. Nothing good comes from being noticed by power. Lyra sank onto the bench, her throat raw. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even want to be there. He just looked at me like he knew me. Era turned sharply. No one knows you. You've hidden in these woods all your life, and that's how it should have stayed. Outside, footsteps crunched over the frost. 2 armored guards appeared in the doorway, the wolf sigil of the royal house gleaming on their chests. The taller of the 2 stepped forward. By order of His Majesty, Alpha King Kaelin Draven, the girl known as Lyra Thornvale, is summoned to Silverfang Hold. Era moved to block the doorway. She's done nothing wrong. The guard's expression remained fixed. The king's word is law. She is to come as a guest, not a prisoner. A guest. The word tasted hollow. Lyra rose slowly, meeting the man's eyes. And if I refuse? The moon has already chosen you, he said quietly. Refusal changes nothing. Era grasped Lyra's hand, her grip fierce. Listen to me. Whatever they tell you, remember who you are. The mark doesn't define you, and neither does their fear. Lyra nodded, though her stomach twisted. She followed the guards outside, the village watching from behind shuttered windows. The road wound down through the forest, still damp from the night's rain. The scent of pine and wet earth filled the air. She didn't look back. By midday they reached the stone bridge that marked the border between Thornvale and the king's lands. Beyond it the mountains rose, silver and unforgiving. The guards kept their distance, speaking little. Once Lyra caught the taller one, watching her reflection in the river's surface, curiosity flickering in his eyes, before he looked away. When they stopped to rest, she sat beside a moss-covered rock, tracing her fingers along the faint mark on her neck. It no longer burned, but it pulsed faintly beneath her skin. What are you? She whispered to herself. A curse or a promise? Night fell before they reached the capital. In the distance she could see the faint glow of torches lining the walls of Silverfang Hold. The city loomed like a fortress of stone and shadow, surrounded by forests that whispered secrets to the moon. As they approached the gate, the guards bowed their heads. From within, a voice echoed, low, commanding, unmistakable. Bring her to me. Lyra's pulse quickened. She remembered those eyes, silver and sharp, the way the world had seemed to stop when he looked at her. Now, that same gaze waited beyond the gate. Era's warnings echoed in her mind, but so did something else. A strange pull, deep and relentless, as if the mark itself longed to answer the call of the Alpha King. The gate creaked open, and Lyra stepped inside the city of wolves, her heart pounding against the weight of her fate. The road to Silverfang Hold twisted through dense woodland and steep, frost-bitten cliffs. The towering gates of the capital rose from the mist, like a beast waking from slumber. Black stone walls crowned with silver wolf statues, their eyes catching the torchlight like ancient sentinels. Lyra had never seen anything so immense, so alive with power. The moment she passed beneath the gate, she felt it. The air was different here, thicker, humming with magic and hierarchy. Guards lined the courtyard, all still and silent. As she stepped from the saddle, the doors of the palace creaked open. A steward met her with a measured bow. You are to be prepared for court, he said. His Majesty will see you at the dusk bell. She was led through marble corridors lit by flickering sconces. Every surface gleamed, gold-inlaid walls, velvet drapes embroidered with the royal crest, and stained glass windows that told the history of the werewolf bloodlines. But Lyra felt like a shadow among it all, wrapped in homespun wool, her boots still muddy from the forest. The chamber they gave her was larger than her entire cottage back home. A fire burned in the hearth, and a bath steamed in the corner. She had just touched the edge of the polished mirror when a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A girl no older than herself entered, her auburn hair braided with ribbons. I'm Lyrael. The palace assigned me to assist you. You should change. He won't wait. Lyra blinked. What does one wear to face a king who thinks you bear a sacred mark? Lyrael gave a cautious smile. Something that doesn't make him think you're hiding a dagger. Soon she stood dressed in deep green wool, a fur-lined cloak draped over her shoulders. The mark at her neck pulsed faintly, hidden beneath the fabric. As the dusk bell tolled across the capital, echoing like a distant heartbeat, a guard appeared to escort her to the throne chamber. The hall was cavernous, echoing with every footstep. Pillars rose like trees, and a skylight bathed the center in fading gold. At the end of the hall stood Kaelin Draven, his cloak of black fur pooling at his feet, his hands resting on the hilt of a ceremonial blade. He did not smile. You came willingly. Lyra met his gaze, unflinching. I wasn't exactly given a choice. I summoned you, not as a prisoner, but as one who bears the mark of the moon. That alone grants you protection here." She touched her neck. "I didn't ask for this mark." "No one ever does," he replied, stepping forward. "But it appeared, and that means something." Lyra's breath caught. Up close, Kalen was more than the distant monarch whispered about in the villages. His presence was immense, commanding, restrained, but not cruel. His eyes, however, were tired, like a man who had seen too many winters and trusted too few souls. "Do you believe I'm cursed?" she asked quietly. "I don't believe in curses," he said. "I believe in blood, instinct, and the will of the moon. And I saw what happened when I touched your hand." "You think I'm your mate," she said, the words foreign on her tongue. Kalen didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the council of elders, seated along the edges of the hall. "The girl bears the royal mark. The law states she must be tested, not condemned." Murmurs rippled through the council. One elder rose. "Her lineage is unknown. No wolf has ever marked a moonless girl. And yet here she stands," Kalen said, "alive, marked and unbroken." He looked back at Lyra. "Until we know the truth, you will remain here under my protection." Her heart pounded. She had stepped into a world ruled by order, bloodlines and ancient law, and now she was the fracture line. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not here to play a part in your legend." "I want answers." Kalen nodded once. "Then you shall have them." The next morning the palace buzzed with unrest. Word of Lyra's mark had spread beyond the capital walls, and whispers echoed through the stone corridors. Some said she was chosen by the old gods. Others muttered darker things, about omens, curses, and a prophecy long buried. Lyra stood on the balcony of her chambers, staring down at the training yard where warriors moved in synchronized combat. Her fingers brushed the faint glow beneath her collarbone. The mark no longer burned, but it pulsed gently, always reminding her it was there. A knock sounded. Lyrael entered, holding a folded parchment. "His Majesty asks that you appear before the council again." "Now." Lyra turned. "Did they decide I'm dangerous yet?" Lyrael hesitated. "They haven't decided anything, but they're afraid. That's worse." Moments later, Lyra walked through the great hall, its vaulted ceiling casting long shadows across the marble. The elders sat in a half-moon, their faces carved in stone. Kalen stood alone at the center, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "She bears a mark sacred to our bloodlines," one elder growled. "And yet she has no known ancestry. No wolf has awakened in her. There's no record of a Thornvale with such power." Lyra lifted her chin. "I never claimed power. You're the ones calling it that." Another elder narrowed her eyes. "You are not mated, yet the mark burns as if claimed. This defies our laws." Kalen's voice cut through the tension. "Then perhaps it is time the laws evolved." The room fell into stunned silence. A third elder, his voice tight with disdain, rose to his feet. "Your Majesty, with respect, this is more than unusual. This is dangerous. If she bears the royal mate seal and is unbonded, it means the prophecy may be awakening." Lyra frowned. "What prophecy?" Kalen's gaze didn't waver. "An old one. A child born under the dark moon, bearing no wolf, yet marked by the moon's blessing. They would either unite the bloodlines or tear the kingdom apart." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lyra felt the room tilt slightly, the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said. "I'm not a symbol. I'm just a girl who wanted to survive one more winter." The elder sneered. "Survival is not enough. The mark binds you to the throne. Whether by fate or trickery, the bond has begun." "Then test me," Lyra snapped, her voice rising with anger she didn't know she had. "If you think this mark is false, prove it." Murmurs erupted across the chamber. The council didn't expect resistance. Kalen stepped forward, his expression taut. "She has the right to speak, and she will not be silenced." The elder nodded slowly. "Very well. The girl will be examined by the temple seers at next moonrise. If the mark is false, it will fade. If it is true—" He let the silence finish the sentence. Kalen looked to Lyra. "You'll stay in the palace until the ritual." "Under my protection." Lyra met his eyes. "Am I a guest or a prisoner dressed in silk?" A muscle in his jaw tightened. "Neither. You're something we haven't seen in centuries, and that terrifies them." Later, as she sat alone in her chamber, the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls, Lyra opened her hand. A small ancient charm sat in her palm, left by Era tucked into the hem of her cloak before she left Thornvale. The moon's symbol was etched into it, identical to the one on her skin. She stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Why me?" Outside, the wolves howled beneath a cloudy sky. The days following the council's decree passed like a slow-burning storm. Lyra remained confined within the palace, watched constantly, though no one called her a prisoner aloud. She wasn't locked in, but every hallway had a guard, every doorway an eye. She spent most of her hours in the garden behind the east wing, the only place where the air felt real and the silence belonged to her. The roses there had long since withered under the frost, but some small things endured. A stubborn sprig of lavender, a patch of wild mint clinging to life. Each evening, the mark on her skin flared softly, a pulse she had begun to associate with Kaelin's presence. It wasn't desire, not yet. It was recognition, deep and unsettling, like the ground beneath her knowing which way she would fall. She didn't see him again until the 5th night. He stood at the edge of the garden, cloaked in black, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. For a moment, he said nothing. "I'm not used to being kept in a gilded cage," she said, not turning to face him. "You're not in a cage," Kaelin replied, stepping closer. "You're in the center of a kingdom that doesn't know what to do with you." Lyra looked over her shoulder. "That's not much of a difference." His jaw tightened. "The council is bound by laws older than any of us. They don't bend easily." "Then break them," she said, voice sharp. "You're the Alpha King. And if I do? If I defy them, what happens to the order we've bled to keep?" He stepped beside her, folding his arms. "This mark, whatever it means, it's forcing every pack to confront the truth. That bloodlines are not the only path to power." Lyra studied his face. "You speak like someone who wants to believe it. I've seen what blind loyalty to law brings. I buried brothers during the Blood Wars. All because the council clung to prophecy and rank like shields." He paused. "But your mark, wasn't supposed to happen." The words lingered like smoke. Lyra turned back to the dark sky, the stars blurred by cloud. A rustling behind them cut the moment short. Ira stepped into the garden, flanked by a younger palace servant. She wore her thick travel cloak, and her face was drawn with exhaustion. "Ira?" Lyra moved toward her, stunned. The old woman opened her arms. "They sent word to Thornvale. I came as soon as I could. You think I'd let them test you without someone at your side?" Lyra threw herself into her arms. The scent of pine resin and dried herbs filled her lungs. "Home." Kaelin nodded respectfully. "You raised her." "I protected her from stories like this," Ira said. "And now the stories have come anyway." That night the three of them sat in the corner chamber, while Era unpacked a worn satchel filled with charms, roots, and small jars of dried petals. "They're not just afraid of the mark," she said. "They're afraid of what it might awaken. A prophecy is safe when it's sleeping." Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the fire dance. "What if I fail the ritual? What if the mark fades?" "Then you live," Era said gently. "And if it doesn't fade, if it grows, then you were born for something none of us can yet name." Later, after Era had fallen asleep beside the hearth, Lyra stood at the window overlooking the courtyard. Snow had begun to fall in thin, silent flurries. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, long and low, not in warning but in longing. And beneath her skin the mark beat like a secret heartbeat, echoing a truth she still didn't understand. Lyra quickly learned that the palace was less a home and more a performance stage, where every glance held judgment and every word masked a test. Her presence had shifted the court's balance, though no one said it aloud. The nobles smiled with teeth bared like wolves, and behind closed doors they whispered. The first lesson came during breakfast in the grand hall. She was seated far from the king, placed instead beside the courtiers and noble daughters, who eyed her as if she were a curiosity, not a guest. Lady Maelys, the daughter of the Ironfang pack and the most adorned woman at court, leaned in with a voice sweet as honey. "You do know which spoon is for broth, don't you?" she asked, eyes glinting. Lyra gave a small smile. "The one that fits in a traitor's mouth, I imagine." The table stilled. Then one of the nobles gave a half-laugh, quickly stifled. Maelys narrowed her eyes but said nothing more. Later, in the library, Kaelin found her standing between two towering shelves, her fingers trailing over the spines of ancient law books. "You handled Maelys better than most," he said. "She underestimated how often I've been insulted before sunrise," Lyra replied. "Thornvale isn't gentle, Your Majesty." He smirked faintly. "It's Kaelin when we're alone." She turned, arms folded. Why am I really here, beyond the mark, beyond the ritual? Kaelin's expression shifted. Because I want to see what you do when the world refuses to see you. Lyra stared at him, caught off guard. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now, he said. Until the seers confirm what the mark means. Despite herself, Lyra nodded. Then teach me. If I'm to be paraded through these halls, I want to know what I'm walking into. Kaelin hesitated, then motioned toward a table. Start here. Learn the bloodlines of every high house. Learn who bows from loyalty and who bows from fear. And don't ever forget, power hides in silence more often than it roars. Over the next week, Lyra studied under a rotation of tutors. She learned the formal dialect used in court proclamations, the unspoken rules of royal politics, and the long, tangled history of the northern pacts. Every night she collapsed into her bed, her mind heavy with names and lies. Era, always close, reminded her to listen to more than words. Watch their hands, she said, handing Lyra a sprig of sage. A wolf's truth is in the twitch of fingers, not the bend of the knee. But the mark still pulsed beneath her skin. It grew warm whenever Kaelin entered the room, and though they rarely spoke in public, his gaze found hers too often to be accidental. One night, while walking the edge of the training yard, she found herself face to face with Varin, the king's second. I've seen your kind before, he said, voice low and flat. Girls who think they've risen because of a symbol. The court eats them. Lyra didn't flinch. Then I'll eat back. Varin studied her for a long moment before nodding. You may yet surprise them. But Lyra knew he didn't trust her. Not really, none of them did. Back in her chambers, she stared into the fire. The mark had flared again that day, but it wasn't pain. It was something else, something old. Not just the call of a mate, but the echo of memory of something waiting just beneath the surface. She pressed her fingers to it and whispered, "If you're mine, then speak." The flames didn't answer, but somewhere in the distance, a wolf's cry pierced the air, not wild, but mourning. The blood moon rose red over Silverfang Hold, casting a rust-colored glow across the battlements and bathing the palace in an eerie stillness. The entire kingdom held its breath. Every werewolf born under the moon's eye knew the power of this night, the one where truth could no longer hide. Lyra stood before the great stone archway of the Seer's Hall, her breath shallow, her hands cold, despite the thick velvet cloak draped over her shoulders. The mark on her neck throbbed with heat, brighter now, glowing through the fabric like a flame beneath skin. Inside the hall, the temple seers waited. 3 ancient women cloaked in grey, their eyes clouded not by age, but by visions. Ritual chants had already begun, and the air reeked of sage, iron, and bloodroot. Kaelin met her outside the chamber. His jaw was tense, his armor simple, unadorned. No crown rested on his head tonight. "You can still walk away," he said quietly. Lyra lifted her chin. "So you know I won't." He hesitated. "If the ritual confirms the mark, the council will be forced to act. But if it rejects you—" "I'll survive that too," she said. "I've survived worse." Kaelin nodded, but his eyes betrayed something. Fear, maybe. Not for the kingdom, for her. Inside the ritual chamber, the seers stood around a shallow stone basin filled with water, so still it reflected Lyra's face like glass. They beckoned her forward without a word. Era stood behind her, her hands folded in prayer. "Do not move," one of the seers whispered. "Speak no lie. Think no falsehood. The moon sees all." They placed a drop of her blood into the basin. The surface rippled, then stilled again. A second seer touched Lyra's mark with the tip of a glowing iron rod. Pain exploded through her body, not sharp, but deep and slow, like fire crawling through her veins. Her knees buckled. She tasted copper. The third seer murmured in the old tongue, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "If the mark is false, it will wither. If it is true, it will claim." Lyra gasped. The mark flared, then seared, then burned white-hot. A low rumble shook the chamber. Wind howled through the cracks in the ceiling. The basin cracked down the center, the water within steaming into vapor. The seers staggered back, one dropped to her knees. "It is true," the eldest whispered. "The moon's claim has returned." Era let out a sob. The room spun around Lyra, her vision blurred, her body trembling, but she didn't fall. She stood, barely breathing, the light of the mark illuminating the space like a beacon. Kaelin stepped into the chamber, eyes wide with a mix of awe and alarm. The seers turned to him as one. "She is the moon's chosen. You are bound." "No," Lyra croaked. Not yet. The head seer nodded solemnly. Then you must take the burden together. The light slowly dimmed, the pulsing in her neck fading into a low hum. The iron rod, now blackened, was cast aside. As the ritual ended, Kaelin approached her. You did what none of them expected. Even me. Lyra's hands shook as she adjusted her cloak. It's not over. No, he agreed, but it has begun. The council reconvened that night in a fury. Whispers of the prophecy raced through the court. Allies and enemies took shape in silence. Lyra sat in the shadows of her chamber, a cool cloth pressed to her fevered skin. Her body ached, but her heart was quiet. Somewhere deep within her, something had awakened. Not a wolf, not yet, but a knowing that this power was older than law, older than the crown, that it had waited centuries for someone to carry it forward, and that someone somehow was her. Snow fell steadily on Silverfang Hold, blanketing the rooftops and battlements in layers of white silence. But inside the palace, tension pressed down like a storm held in check. The ritual had changed everything. Lyra was no longer just a curiosity or a threat. She was now a living mark of prophecy, undeniable and dangerous. The council had withdrawn to deliberate. Kaelin had not spoken to her since the night of the trial. She understood. Even for a king, some decisions were not made easily. Lyra stood in the training yard at dawn, gripping a wooden staff, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Across from her stood Commander Elric, a broad-shouldered warrior whose silence said more than words. Again, he barked. She lunged, twisting as he parried easily, and knocked the staff from her hands. Pain shot through her wrist as she hit the snow-covered ground. You hesitate, he said. That gets you killed. I'm not trying to be a warrior, she snapped. You don't have the luxury of trying, he replied, tossing the staff back. You carry a mark that half the realm sees as salvation, and the other half sees as ruin. Either learn to stand, or prepare to fall. She rose, jaw clenched. Then teach me to stand. For the next hour she trained without speaking. Each strike, each movement burned through the cold in her limbs. Elric said nothing more, but when she finally collapsed to her knees, he offered her a hand. You'll last longer than they think, he muttered. Later that day, in the council chamber, voices rose in argument. From the balcony above, Lyra listened, unseen. She is unproven, Varin said. No wolf, no lineage, no right. She bears the mark, Kaelin replied evenly. A mark that responded to the blood moon and shattered the seer's basin. That is not fiction, Varin's voice sharpened. Or its manipulation. Ancient magic can be forged. She could be the work of traitors. Enough, Kaelin growled, and for a moment the room fell quiet. She remains under my protection, he said. Challenge that, and you challenge the throne. Lyra turned away before she could hear more. She didn't need to. The divide was clear. That night she returned to her chamber to find Ira sitting near the hearth, mending a cloak. The fire flickered low, casting the room in hues of amber and rust. They fear you more now than they ever did when they called you cursed, Ira said. They should, Lyra muttered. I'm starting to fear myself too. Ira looked up, her eyes kind but steady. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the sign you're walking through something that matters. Lyra exhaled slowly. I dreamt again. The wolf. She was standing in snow. Her eyes were mine, but she didn't speak. She will, Ira said. She's not just your shadow, she's your memory. What was forgotten must be remembered. The next morning a summons came, not from the council, from Kaelin. He met her in the war room, maps spread across the table, candles dripping wax onto parchment. I'm sending riders to the old temple, he said without preamble. The first pack temple near the western ridge. Lyra raised a brow. Why? Because your mark is not just rare, it's ancient. And that temple holds truths the council has buried. She studied him. You trust me then? Kaelin looked up, his expression unreadable. I trust what I've seen, and I trust that the moon doesn't choose without purpose. Outside, the wind howled against the stone, but inside something steadier stirred. Between fire and frost, between suspicion and belief, a bond was forming. And Lyra could feel it, not just in the mark but in her bones. Whispers followed Lyra through the halls like shadows that never lifted. The mark on her neck had faded into a soft glow, but the court's suspicions had not. Some bowed out of fear, others glared openly. None more so than Lady Malis. She moved through the palace like a predator draped in silk, her every step calculated. It wasn't just Kaelin's attention she craved. It was power, sealed in tradition and blessed by the council, and Lyra's very presence threatened all of it. That afternoon, Lyra found herself summoned to the greenhouse, a strange request from the royal herbalists. When she arrived, the room was empty, the scent of jasmine and rosemary thick in the air. She took a cautious step forward. The door clicked shut behind her. "I was curious," Mylis's voice drawled from the shadows, "what kind of girl it takes to turn the king's head without even showing her wolf." Lyra didn't turn around. "I didn't turn his head. I bear a mark, one I never asked for." Mylis stepped into view, her gown embroidered with silver vines, her smile razor-sharp. "How noble of you. Playing the reluctant chosen." Lyra met her gaze. "You want him. You think this is about affection. It isn't. It's something much older." "Oh, I know," Mylis said smoothly. "Older than you understand. Older than he understands. Which is why I'm not the one being watched by half the council like a potential traitor." Lyra's pulse quickened. "You're not threatening me." "No," Mylis said softly. "I'm warning you. You're in a game you don't know the rules of. And when you fall, I'll be the one left standing." Later that night, Lyra felt it. An ache behind her eyes, a sudden wave of nausea. Her skin burned. The mark flared unnaturally, pulsing faster than before. Era found her collapsed near the balcony doors, her breath shallow. "Something's wrong," Lyra gasped. "It's too hot. It hurts." Ira's face darkened. She sniffed the tea Lyra had been drinking, faintly sweet, floral, deceptively gentle. Her fingers dipped into the cup, testing the surface. "Bellshade root," she muttered. "In small doses, it mimics fever. In larger ones, it can drive a wolf into madness." Lyra blinked against the dizziness. Why would anyone... But she didn't need to finish. The answer was already inside her head. Mylis. By morning, Kaelin stormed into the chamber, flanked by Varin and 2 healers. His face was carved in stone, but his eyes burned when he saw Lyra pale and shaking beneath the covers. "Who gave her this?" he growled. The servants stammered. One finally spoke. "Lady Mylis sent the tray. She said it was a gift." Kaelin's hand tightened around the hilt of his blade. "Take her into custody." But Varin hesitated. "She's the daughter of Ironfang. If we move without proof, we risk war." Kaelin's voice dropped, cold and sharp. "She tried to poison the Moon's Chosen. War would be the lesser sin." Lyra sat up, forcing the dizziness down. "Don't start a war over me." Kaelin turned to her. They already started it the moment they chose tradition over truth. Mylis was taken under cover of night. The council did not protest. Not openly, but the damage had been done. Lyra stood at her window long after the tower bells struck midnight, watching the snow fall like ash. She no longer doubted that someone wanted her gone. And worse, she now knew they were willing to destroy the kingdom's balance to make it happen. Her reflection in the glass flickered. Behind her eyes, the white wolf stood again, closer this time, not speaking, but watching, waiting. The wind that rolled down from the western ridge carried the bite of early frost and the weight of something older than time. Kaelin rode in silence, his cloak whipping behind him, his eyes fixed on the mountain pass ahead. Behind him, Lyra followed on horseback, flanked by a small escort sworn to secrecy. They had left the palace under the cover of darkness, away from the eyes of the court and council. Only Era knew their destination, and she had pressed a charm into Lyra's hand before they departed, whispering, "The temple remembers what the world forgets." The journey took them through dense woods and narrow paths carved into the bones of the mountain. As they climbed, snow gave way to stone and the silence deepened. Not even birds sang here. Hours passed before the ancient ruins of the first Pact Temple emerged from the mist, a circle of broken stone columns and a cracked altar overgrown with thornvine. Time had nearly swallowed it, but the magic still lingered, humming faintly beneath the earth. Kaelin dismounted first, his expression unreadable. No one has set foot here in a generation. The last High Seer died with the truth buried in her throat. Lyra stepped forward, the cold sinking through her boots. The moment her feet touched the central stone, the mark on her neck pulsed. Once, then again, brighter. "This place knows you," Kaelin said softly. "I feel like I've been here before," she murmured, her voice barely carrying. "But only in dreams." She knelt beside the altar, brushing away the snow and moss. Etchings revealed themselves, an ancient language of curves and symbols, and in the center, carved into the stone, the mark that lived on her skin. "It's the same," she whispered. "Exactly the same." Kaelin's voice was low. This temple was built by the first blood-bound wolves. They didn't choose mates, they were chosen by the moon marked like you. Lyra ran her fingers over the symbol. Then why did the tradition die? Because tradition is fragile, and fear is stronger than faith. He crouched beside her. The council erased what they didn't understand, called it myth, heresy. The wind picked up, the vines rustled, and then a soft, impossible sound. A growl, low and distant, echoing from the mountain's throat. Kaelin stood sharply, hand on his blade. Lyra froze. The temperature dropped as the mist thickened. Shapes moved beyond the tree line, too silent to be animals, too slow to be wind. Kaelin stepped in front of her. "We're not alone." Lyra's vision blurred. Her mark flared, not in warning, but in recognition. Her knees buckled, and she dropped to the ground, gasping as heat shot through her chest. A voice rose inside her, not hers, not Era's. Something older, feminine, powerful. "Blood called you here." The mark awakened not by touch, but by truth. Lyra's eyes widened. In the mist, the white wolf stood, tall, radiant, ancient. Its eyes gleamed with fire and memory. She reached forward, trembling. "Who are you?" "You are." The words struck like thunder. She collapsed onto the stone. Kaelin caught her before she hit the ground. "Lyra." But her eyes glowed faintly now. Her breath slowed. "She's seen something," Kaelin murmured. "Or someone." When her eyes opened again, the mist had thinned. The wolf was gone. But something in Lyra's posture had shifted. Calmer. Stronger. "I remember now," she said, voice hoarse. "I'm not cursed. I'm descended from the moon's first daughter, the one they tried to erase." Kaelin stared at her, a mix of awe and fear flickering across his face. "Then you're not just marked," he said. "You are the prophecy." Lyra nodded slowly, and for the first time she felt it. Not the fear, not the doubt, but the undeniable truth. She had come home. The ride back to Silverfang Hold was silent, but not empty. Something had shifted between Lyra and Kaelin, something spoken without words. The air around them felt charged, alive with the memory of the temple and the truth it had whispered. By the time they passed through the palace gates, snow had begun to fall again, soft and steady. The guards took one look at their faces and asked no questions. In the privacy of his war room, Kaelin unrolled a map across the table. Lyra stood across from him, her hands pressed to the edge of the wood as if grounding herself. "We need to act before the council does," he said. "If they learn what you saw, what you remembered, they'll call it rebellion. Or worse, blasphemy. They've lived too long pretending prophecy is myth," she replied. "They won't want it alive and breathing." Kaelin looked at her, his voice quiet. "You carry her blood." Lyra didn't flinch. "And you carry the throne. We're both chained to legacies we didn't ask for." He moved closer. The mark on her neck warmed, pulsing between them. "What happened at the temple? Your wolf, the voice, none of that changes one truth." She held his gaze. "Which truth?" Kaelin's jaw tensed. "That I am drawn to you. Not because of prophecy, not because of the mark, but because every time I look at you, I feel less like a king and more like a man who wants to believe fate isn't just a story told to children." Lyra's breath caught. "Then why do you look like you're about to run from it?" "Because if I claim you," he said, stepping closer, "I condemn you to a kingdom that won't understand, a court that will tear you apart, a war I may not be able to stop." "And if you don't?" she asked. Kaelin didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, gently brushing her collar aside. The mark flared, soft gold, then silver-white, pulsing once beneath his touch. His hand trembled. In that moment, it wasn't the king who moved toward her. It was the man who had seen war, who had lost too much, and who stood now before something he didn't know how to deserve. Their lips met, not out of duty, not out of prophecy, but out of hunger, for truth, for relief, for something real in a world where everything had been decided before they were born. When they pulled apart, the mark on Lyra's neck had changed. It now mirrored the ancient seal carved into the altar, full, complete, unmistakable. They stared at it in silence. "Do you feel that?" Lyra whispered. Kaelin nodded. "It's not just a bond. It's a call. But the moment was short-lived. A sharp knock shattered the quiet. Varin entered, his face grim. The council is gathering. Rumors are spreading faster than we can silence them. Some claim the mark has evolved. Others, that you've mated. Kaelin straightened. What they claim doesn't matter. It does if they see it as betrayal, Varin snapped. The prophecy says she'll unite us or destroy us. If you've chosen her without council approval, they'll see it as the first step toward ruin. Kaelin stepped between Varin and Lyra. Then let them come. I won't hide what's already written in our blood. Varin looked to Lyra. Then you'd best be ready. The old ways won't go quietly. After he left, Lyra turned to Kaelin. We crossed a line, she said. No, he replied. We stepped into who we were always meant to be. Outside, the snow continued to fall. But inside, beneath the weight of legacy and fire, something new had taken root. Not fragile, not forced, but real. And the mark on Lyra's skin glowed with quiet power, no longer waiting to be seen. The throne room was no longer a place of order. Tension coiled in every corner, and the council chamber buzzed with fear and fury. Word had spread like wildfire. Kaelin had bonded with Lyra, the mark had transformed, and the prophecy was no longer a distant threat. It was walking their halls. Guards stood doubled at every entrance. The banners of the high houses hung motionless in the cold draught, each one a silent witness to what was coming. Kaelin entered first, his posture carved from steel. Lyra followed beside him, not behind, her cloak drawn back to expose the mark, now fully awakened. Radiant, unmistakable, alive with ancestral fire. Gasps echoed through the chamber. One elder rose, voice sharp with outrage. You defied sacred law, mating without sanction, breaking the ancient balance. Kaelin didn't flinch. I honored the moon's choice. The mark doesn't answer to your laws, it answers to truth. Another slammed a fist to the table. You've brought ruin upon us. The prophecy warns of division. And yet here I stand, Lyra said, her voice clear and strong. Not as a weapon, but as the descendant of the moon's first daughter. You buried our history to maintain your power. But you cannot bury what lives in the blood. Varin stood at the edge of the circle, watching the council, not interfering. She speaks as though we serve her, the elder hissed. She speaks as the one chosen by the very force you claim to serve, Kaelin replied, and I stand by her. The hall erupted, voices clashing, old fears spilling into accusations. Then Kaelin raised a hand, and silence fell. I invoke trial by the moon. The word struck like thunder. Even Varin's eyes widened. The council froze. That right hasn't been claimed in generations, one whispered. It's madness. It is law, Kaelin said. When truth and tradition conflict, the moon decides. You will not judge her with fear. She will face your challenge and survive it. Lyra stood still, her heart racing. She hadn't known he would do this, but something in her chest settled. There was no more running, no more shadows, only truth. A slow, reluctant voice answered, Then let the trial be held by the next full moon. If she fails, she dies. Kaelin nodded. And if she succeeds, she becomes more than mate. She becomes Luna. The elders recoiled. The word had not been spoken in decades. The last Luna had died during the Blood Wars, and no wolf had held the title since, but none could take the words back. Outside, bells rang through the hold. Servants and nobles alike turned toward the palace, sensing the shift in the air. Something was changing. The old order had cracked. Back in her chamber, Lyra stood at the mirror, staring at her reflection. The mark glowed steadily, her skin pale against the firelight. Era approached quietly. He invoked the trial. Lyra nodded. He didn't ask. Would you have said no? Lyra exhaled slowly. No, I'm done hiding. Era placed a hand on her shoulder. Then be ready. The trial isn't just a test of strength, it's a test of soul. They'll try to break you. They've been trying since I was born, Lyra said. They've failed every time. That night, as the wind howled around the towers, Kaelin stood alone beneath the moon. His heart was heavy, but not with doubt, with purpose. He whispered into the cold, Let the moon see us now. We do not fear her judgment. And above them the clouds parted just enough for the light to break through. The full moon rose heavy and clear above Silverfang Hold, casting a pale light that made the stone walls glow like bone. The air was thin with tension. Every torch in the courtyard burned higher than it should have, as though the flame itself knew this night belonged to something ancient. Lyra stood in the center of the stone ring. No armor, no cloak, only the ceremonial garb of the old blood, white linen bound by a silver belt. The mark on her neck pulsed with quiet fire. Around her the council gathered in silence. The nobles filled the balconies. Even the servants held their breath. Kaelin stood at the edge of the circle, eyes locked on hers. He could not intervene now. The trial by the moon demanded solitude. Varin stepped forward, his voice solemn. You, Lyra Thornvale, marked of the moon, claimed by the Alpha King, stand accused of false blood, forbidden bonding, and the awakening of an ancient power without sanction. She didn't blink. And I stand ready to prove what was always mine. The crowd stirred. Varin gestured to the far gate. Then faced the council's chosen. The doors creaked open, revealing a tall figure wrapped in dark wolfskin. His eyes gleamed amber, his steps sure. A warrior, older, hardened, and loyal to tradition. His name was Dren. Lyra swallowed her fear. This wasn't a fight to the death, but it might break her all the same. The trial tested not the body, but the will. If she collapsed, yielded, or broke the bond under pressure, the mark would fade. She would be declared false. The horn sounded. The trial began. Dren circled her slowly, his voice a growl. You were born without a wolf, no howl, no shift, no legacy. And yet you claim descent from the first daughter? I don't claim, Lyra said. I remember. He struck first, not with fists, but with words. You are a girl who touched a king's hand and believed it made you something. That's not fate, that's arrogance. Pain sliced through her mark. A test, not physical, but spiritual. The trial amplified self-doubt, magnified fear. Lyra staggered, but didn't fall. I never wanted power. I only ever wanted to survive. Dren's voice boomed. Then crawl back to your forest and leave the bloodlines to those born worthy. The mark seared brighter. Lyra clenched her fists. I survived being shunned. I survived silence, exile, poison. You think words will make me bow, she said. I've been broken before. I rose anyway. The wind shifted. Dren stepped closer. Then let your wolf answer, if she exists. Silence fell. And then a sound split the stillness. A low echoing growl, not from the sky but from within. Lyra fell to her knees, her head tilted back. Light poured from the mark, racing across her skin. Her breath hitched. She felt it, not outside her, not waiting, within. Her bones shifted. Her vision blurred. The courtyard gasped. Then it happened. Her wolf emerged. Snow white, eyes like burning starlight. Not a beast, but a memory reborn. The wolf let out a howl that shook the walls of the palace. Kaelin gripped the railing, unable to look away. Varin fell to his knees. The council stood frozen. And Dren, he stepped back, awe etched across his face. It's not just real, he whispered. It's the first blood. Lyra's form returned slowly, the glow fading. The mark now etched deeper into her skin. She stood taller than before, not trembling, not unsure. You asked for the moon's judgment, she said. You have it. The horn blew once more. Varin rose, his voice shaking. The trial is complete. The mark is true. The bond is true. She is Luna. Silence turned to chaos. Nobles cried out. Some wept, others bowed. But no one could deny what they had seen. The moon had chosen. And Lyra had answered. Morning light broke across Silverfang Hold like a slow breath, casting gold across the stones that had stood witness to centuries of silence. But today the silence was different, reverent, not fearful. The mark had been confirmed, the trial completed, and the realm no longer had the luxury of denial. Lyra sat in the high tower chamber, staring out across the valley. The white of her wolf still echoed beneath her skin. She could feel it now. A second heartbeat, strong and steady. Not a presence beside her, but within. Era entered quietly, a fresh cloak folded over one arm. It's time. Lyra turned. For what? Era smiled softly. To walk into the world as who you are. Below, the great hall had been prepared. The council stood arrayed, more subdued now, many of them avoiding Lyra's gaze entirely. The nobles who had once dismissed her now stood in polished armor, their heads bowed as she passed. Kaelin waited at the dais, dressed not as a warrior, but as a king, not distant, not cold, just present, like stone and fire, rooted and ready. Varin stepped forward first, clearing his throat. The mark of Luna has not been seen in a generation. But today we bear witness to its return. By blood, by fire, by the moon's choosing, we accept Lyra as Luna of the realm. Some clapped, others watched, still wary. Lyra stepped to Kaelin's side, her voice clear. This is not the end of an old age, it's the beginning of one where the forgotten are remembered. Where the cast out are called home. Her words rang through the hall, touching something older than law. Kaelin reached for her hand, not as a claim, but as a choice. You stood when others would have run. You rose when the world tried to bury you. Stand with me now, as queen, as Luna. Lyra's hand met his. Not behind you, beside you. The hall erupted, not in chaos, but in relief. Some cried. Others knelt. Outside the palace, bells rang across the city. Wolf calls echoed in celebration, rising from the mountains to the sea. That evening, the new council convened under Kaelin's order. The laws that had exiled the moonless, the markless, the wolf-hidden were struck down. Noble blood would no longer be the only path to power. Lady Malis, still under guard, was exiled to the borderlands. Her name stripped of title, her power dissolved. She left without protest, her pride buried under the weight of her own silence. Varin, once skeptic, pledged new loyalty before the entire court. We feared the mark because we didn't understand it. Now we follow it. The realm shifted, slowly, but irreversibly. Later that night, Kaelin and Lyra stood on the balcony overlooking the capital. Torches flickered like stars, and snow fell gently from a sky clearer than it had been in months. You once asked if I believed in curses, Lyra said. Kaelin looked at her. And do you? No, she replied. But I believe in choices, and I believe in change. He smiled. Then you were never cursed. You were always becoming. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the people gather below, howling in celebration. Lyra spoke softly. I wonder how many others were cast aside with marks no one saw. Power buried beneath fear. Kaelin turned to her. Then we'll find them. We'll rebuild the world to see them. And with that the kingdom of wolves was reborn, not through blood or conquest, but through truth. Not through tradition, but through a girl once called cursed, now called queen. Years later, the fires still burned high in Silverfang Hold during the winter solstice. Snow blanketed the rooftops, and laughter echoed through the valley where silence had once ruled. What had begun as fear had become tradition, and at the heart of that transformation stood the story of a girl once called cursed. Lyra sat in the moon room, an open chamber beneath a crystal dome. Her daughter curled beside her beneath a thick woolen blanket. The child's hair was silver-threaded like her father's, but her eyes were the same quiet storm Lyra had seen in the mirror her whole life. Tell me again, the girl whispered. Tell me about the mark. Lyra smiled, her fingers brushing a lock of hair from the girl's brow. You already know the story, but I want to hear it from you. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, lonely, proud, answered moments later by another, then another. The legacy had stretched far. Villages, once divided by bloodlines, now celebrated the moon's choosing. The abandoned were no longer cast aside, but brought into the fold. Lyra began softly. They called me cursed, said I was born wrong. No wolf, no howl, just silence. But the moon doesn't always speak when we want it to. The girl's eyes grew wide. But the king saw you. He did, Lyra said, her voice quiet. But even before that I saw myself. I had to. No one else would. Then the mark came. Yes, Lyra nodded. It came when I didn't expect it. When I wasn't trying to prove anything. Because fate doesn't need proof. It just needs space. The child whispered. Was it scary? Very, Lyra said with a chuckle. But sometimes fear is a door. She looked down at her daughter. The mark had begun to show faintly on the girl's shoulder, glowing only in moonlight. Not as a prophecy, not as a burden, but as a gift, passed on with love, not shame. You don't have to be anything except who you are, Lyra said. Don't chase the power. Let it come to you. The girl nodded, resting her head on Lyra's arm. Below the tower, the city danced. Kaelin had joined the festival earlier, helping light the fire that marked the start of winter. He had changed too, not softened, but opened. The war-hardened king had become a father, a husband, a symbol of unity. And Lyra, once hunted, now ruled beside him, not with a crown of gold, but with the quiet strength of someone who had carried herself through fire. A knock echoed from the stairwell. Era stepped into the moon room, older now, but still sharp-eyed. "You're late," Lyra said, smiling. "I come with news," Era said, handing her a parchment. Another mark appeared. A boy in the Southern Isles. Same symbol. Lyra unfolded the note. Her fingers traced the familiar shape. "They're still awakening," she whispered. Era nodded. "You started something that cannot be undone." "Good," Lyra thought. She stood, lifting her daughter into her arms. "Come, there's one more fire to see tonight." Together, they descended the stairs and stepped into the night. The air was crisp. The stars above were brilliant. And in the center of the courtyard a new banner flew beside the old crest of the Alpha King. A silver wolf, mid-howl, wrapped in the full circle of the moon. The mark reborn. As the music swelled and voices rose in celebration, Lyra watched the people. Not ruled by fear or blood, but bound by choice, by faith, by the stories they now told freely. She leaned close to her daughter. "Listen carefully," she whispered, "because this is the part where you tell them to subscribe if they want more stories like this one. And if they want to know what happened after." The girl grinned. "They click the next video." Lyra laughed softly. "Yes, because stories don't end. They just wait for someone to listen."